"I dare you." "No way, Mark. It's haunted, I'm telling you." "Chicken, you scared, Billy?" Billy knew he shouldn't. Willow Creek was no ordinary house. It was a place whispered about in hushed tones, a place where shadows moved and the air itself felt heavy with dread. But Mark was right there, in his face, calling him a chicken. What was Billy supposed to do? The old wooden porch groaned under Billy's weight. Each step felt heavier than the last. He could hear Mark behind him, his breath fogging in the cold night air. The front door swung open with a long, low creak. Inside, the house was dark and silent. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. "See, nothing to be scared of," Mark whispered, his voice trembling slightly. Billy edged inside, his heart pounding in his chest. The floorboards groaned under his feet. He could have sworn he heard a whisper, but when he turned around, there was nothing there. They moved deeper into the house, each room darker and more ominous than the last. Then they heard it, a faint giggle like that of a small child. Mark froze, his face pale in the darkness. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. They followed the sound of laughter to a small room at the end of the hallway. The laughter was faint, almost like an echo from the past, sending chills down their spines as they moved closer. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, each step echoing in the silence, amplifying their sense of unease. The door creaked open, revealing a child's nursery. The room was frozen in time, untouched for years, with an air of melancholy hanging thickly. The faint scent of old wood and dust filled their nostrils as they stepped inside. A rocking horse stood frozen in the corner, and a doll lay abandoned on the floor. The toys, once loved and cherished, now seemed to be mere shadows of happier times. The rocking horse, with its chipped paint and worn seat, looked as if it had been waiting for a child who never returned. On a small table by the window, they found a dusty diary. The diary seemed to be calling out to them, its cover worn and pages yellowed with age. The window beside the table let in a sliver of moonlight, casting an eerie glow on the diary. Billy blew off the dust and opened it carefully. The dust swirled in the air, catching the light and creating a ghostly haze. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the fragile pages, each one a portal to the past. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. The handwriting was delicate, almost childlike, and each word seemed to carry the weight of forgotten memories. The diary was a silent witness to a time long gone. He began to read aloud. July 12th, 1888. The date seemed to leap off the page, transporting them back to a different era. The room seemed to grow colder as the words filled the air. "Mama says we have to be very quiet today." The words were simple, yet they carried a sense of urgency and fear. It was as if the child who wrote them was whispering from the past, pleading for silence. "There are bad men outside and they mustn't find us." The phrase "bad men" was circled in red ink, standing out starkly against the faded pages. The fear and desperation in those words were palpable, making their hearts race as they imagined the terror the child must have felt. The air in the room suddenly turned icy cold. It was as if an invisible hand had turned the temperature dial to freezing, sending a wave of frost through the very walls. The once warm and inviting space now felt like a forgotten icebox, abandoned and left to the mercy of the elements. Billy felt a shiver run down his spine. His breath came out in visible puffs, each exhale a testament to the sudden drop in temperature. He rubbed his arms vigorously, trying to generate some warmth, but it was futile. The cold seemed to seep into his very bones, making him feel as if he were encased in ice. He could hear the blood pounding in his ears, a rhythmic drumbeat that matched the growing sense of dread in his heart. Every sound was amplified, every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside. It was as if the room itself was alive, breathing and watching, waiting for something to happen. "Let's get out of here," Mark whispered, his voice tight with fear. But Billy was transfixed. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the diary in his hands. the old leather-bound book that seemed to hold the secrets of the past. Mark's words barely registered in his mind, drowned out by the overwhelming sense of curiosity and dread that filled him. He turned the page of the diary, his eyes scanning the faded ink. July 13th, 1888. The date seemed to leap off the page, a stark reminder of the passage of time. The handwriting was delicate, almost fragile, as if the writer had been afraid to press too hard and leave a permanent mark on the paper. The bad men are gone now, but Mama is still sad. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight of sorrow that was almost palpable. Billy could almost see the woman who had written them, her face etched with grief and loss. She was a ghost of the past, her pain echoing through the years to reach him in the present. She says we can't go home anymore. The house that had once been a sanctuary was now a place of fear and sorrow. The family had been forced to leave, to abandon the place they had once called home. The sense of loss was overwhelming, a heavy burden that weighed down on Billy's heart. She says we have to stay here, in the shadows. The shadows were their only refuge, a place where they could hide from the world and the dangers that lurked within it. The darkness was both a comfort and a curse, a place of safety and a reminder of all they had lost. Billy felt a chill run through him, a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room and everything to do with the haunting words of the past. Suddenly, they heard it. Heavy footsteps coming up the stairs, slow and deliberate, each step sending a tremor through the old house. Mark grabbed Billy's arm. "Someone's coming," he hissed. They scrambled to hide, squeezing into a narrow space between the wall and a tall armoire. Billy peeked through a crack in the door. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, draped in a long, flowing gown. It moved slowly, its head turning from side to side as if searching for something. Billy held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The figure stopped in front of an old, tarnished mirror. For a moment, Billy could have sworn he saw a flicker of movement in the reflection. A pair of glowing red eyes stared back at him. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with an unspoken dread. Billy's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Was it a ghost? A figment of his imagination? He couldn't be sure. The figure's gown rustled softly, a sound that sent chills down Billy's spine. It raised a skeletal hand, pointing directly at the mirror. The glass began to ripple, as if it were made of water. Billy's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to run, to scream, but he was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. The figure's eyes never left his, glowing brighter with each passing second. Suddenly, the mirror shattered, shards of glass flying in all directions. Billy shielded his face, feeling the sting of tiny cuts on his skin. When he dared to look again, the figure was gone, leaving only the broken mirror and a lingering sense of terror. Billy knew he would never forget those eyes, or the way they seemed to pierce right through him into the very depths of his soul. The figure turned, its head snapping in the direction of their hiding place. Billy shrank back, his blood turning to ice. He could feel Mark trembling beside him. The footsteps started again, this time coming towards them, closer and closer. Billy and Mark were trapped. Just when they thought all hope was lost, Billy noticed something. A faint glimmer of light coming from under the floorboards. Could it be a way out? He motioned to Mark, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. Could they make it before the figure reached them? To be continued?